He was not asleep, but he let the whole garden believe he was. Because a man who appeared to be sleeping heard things a man who was awake never would. Takeshi Ono had perfected the art of it over many years. He would settle himself beneath the old tree at the far end of the garden, in the shade, with his eyes closed and his breathing slow. And he would wait. People spoke differently around a sleeping man. His men relaxed their guard. His enemies revealed their timing. The household, believing itself unobserved, showed him its true face rather than the arranged one it presented when he was watching. He had learned more about the people around him from beneath that tree, feigning sleep, than from any amount of direct interrogation. It was a cold thing to do, and he was a cold man, and he had long ago stopped pretending to himself that he was anything else. He was cold because coldness had kept him alive. That was the whole of the explanation, though almost no one ever asked for it. He had risen through a world that punished warmth, that treated softness as a wound to be exploited, and he had survived it by becoming a man with nothing soft left to exploit. People feared him. He preferred it that way. Fear was legible. Affection was a trap. He had buried whatever capacity he might once have had for the second thing so long ago and so thoroughly that he genuinely believed it was gone. And he was not sorry. Because a man without that capacity could not be hurt through it. Before I take you beneath that tree and into the strange afternoon that began to undo a lifetime of carefully maintained coldness, because what a 2-year-old did to the most feared man in the city while he pretended to sleep is going to stay with you. Stay with me. Subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. This story travels far, and I love to see how far. The maid was called Amara, and she had been in the house for a little under a year, and she had a son. Takeshi knew this the way he knew everything about his household, as a fact filed away, a variable accounted for. The boy was 2. Perhaps just over. His name was Obi. Takeshi had never spoken to the child and had no intention of ever doing so. Children were noise and mess and vulnerability, 3 things he had organized his entire life to exclude. The maid kept the boy carefully out of his way, as she had been instructed to, as everyone who valued their position understood to do. Takeshi Ono was not a man whose garden a toddler was permitted to disturb, which was why what happened beneath the tree that afternoon should not have happened at all. Takeshi had settled into his false sleep in the early afternoon, in the deep shade, and he had been there perhaps 20 minutes, gathering the sounds of the garden, when he became aware of something small approaching through the grass. He kept his eyes closed. He assumed it was a bird, or a cat, or the wind, and he did not adjust his breathing. And then a small hand touched his knee. He did not move. This was, he would reflect later, the beginning of everything, the fact that he did not move. Every instinct he had was built for exactly this, the unexpected touch, the thing that should not be there. And every instinct told him to open his eyes and end whatever this was. But some other instinct, one he did not recognize, one he had not consulted in decades, told him to stay still and see what happened. So he stayed still. He kept his eyes closed and his breathing slow, and he let the child believe he was asleep. The boy patted his knee. Then, apparently satisfied that the large, still man was harmless in the way sleeping things are harmless, Obi sat down beside him in the grass and began, in the low murmuring nonsense stream of a 2-year-old, to talk to him. Takeshi could not follow most of it. It was the half-formed language of the very young, more music than meaning, words surfacing out of babble and sinking back into it. But he lay there in his false sleep, and he listened. And slowly the meaning began to assemble itself from the fragments, and what he understood, lying beneath the tree with his eyes closed, was that the child was telling him about his day. The small, enormous events of a 2-year-old's day. A bug he had seen. A thing that was red, a moment of some private triumph or grief that Takeshi could not decode, but could feel the shape of in the boy's voice. Obi was not asking anything of him. He had simply found a large, warm, still presence in the garden and had decided, with the total trust of a child who has not yet learned what the world contains, that it was a good thing to sit beside and talk to. No one had spoken to Takeshi Ono like that in his entire adult life. No one had ever, in his memory, simply sat beside him and shared the small contents of their day, expecting nothing, wanting nothing, afraid of nothing. Everyone who came near him wanted something, or feared something. It was the water he swam in. He had forgotten there was any other kind. And here was a child who wanted nothing from him but his presence, and feared nothing about him at all, because the child was too young to know that he was a thing to be feared. Funny thing about the mask you wear so long you forget it's a mask. It takes someone who can't see it at all to remind you there's a face underneath. The boy talked until he ran out of things to say, and then he leaned against the large, still man's arm, the way small children lean against anything warm and stable, and Takeshi felt the small weight settle against him, and he did not move, and something in his chest that he had believed long dead turned over in its sleep, and began, faintly, to ache. He should have ended it. 100 times in the next few minutes he told himself to open his eyes, to summon the maid, to have the child removed and the incident forgotten, and his careful coldness restored. And 100 times he did not, because the small weight against his arm was doing something to him that he had no defense against, precisely because he had never in his life needed a defense against it. He had armored himself against every kind of attack the world could make. He had no armor against a 2-year-old leaning on his arm. Amara found them like that. Takeshi heard her approach, heard her stop dead, heard the sharp intake of breath as she took in the scene, her son, leaning against the sleeping form of the most dangerous man in the city, the man she had been so carefully instructed to keep the boy away from. He heard the pure terror flood into her, the terror of a mother who understands exactly how badly this could go. And he heard her move fast to gather the child up and away before the sleeping man could wake and be angry. "I'm so sorry," she was whispering, frantic, scooping Obi up. "I'm so sorry. I turned around for one moment. He got away from me. Please, sir, please. He didn't mean any." Takeshi opened his eyes. He watched the terror on her face redouble as she realized he was awake, had perhaps been awake, and he watched her put herself between him and the child in the instinctive way that told him she had learned somewhere that powerful men were things to shield children from. She held her son against her shoulder, and she braced for whatever was coming, and Takeshi understood that she expected the worst, that in her experience of men like him the worst was what came, and that she was standing there anyway, shielding her boy, ready to absorb it. "He was telling me about his day," Takeshi said. It was not what Amara had expected. She stared at him. "I wasn't asleep," Takeshi said. "I'm rarely asleep. He came and sat beside me and told me about his day, about a bug and a thing that was red, and he leaned against my arm, and I let him, because he stopped. He did not have the end of the sentence. He had not had an unrehearsed sentence in years, and this one had run out of road. Because the honest end of it was because no one has ever done that to me, and I did not know I needed it, and he could not say that, could not even fully think it. He wasn't afraid of me," Takeshi finished instead. "He's the only person in this house who isn't afraid of me. I found that I didn't want to teach him to be." Amara did not know what to do with this. She stood holding her son, and she searched the cold man's face for the trap, because in her experience there was always a trap, and she could not find it, and the not finding frightened her almost as much as a threat would have. "You're not angry," she said carefully. "No, you're not going to." She could not finish it. The things she was afraid of were too many to name. "I'm not going to do anything," Takeshi said, "except ask you not to teach him to be afraid of me for as long as you can manage it. I know you'll have to, eventually. He'll grow up in this house, and this house will teach him what I am, and one day he'll look at me the way everyone else does. I understand that. But not yet. Let him not know a while longer. The word came out rough, unfamiliar. It's good. It's good, what he doesn't know. Don't take it from him faster than the world will take it anyway. The thing about coldness is that it's not the absence of warmth. It's warmth that has been frozen over because the cold was safer. And ice, it turns out, remembers what it was. That was the beginning. Takeshi did not understand it as a beginning at the time. He understood it only as a strange afternoon, an aberration, a lapse he would correct. But it did not correct. The next day he found himself beneath the tree again, and this time he was not entirely sure he had gone there to gather the sounds of the garden. And the boy came again. Amara could not keep a 2-year-old from a thing he had decided he liked. And Obi had decided he liked the large still man under the tree. And Takeshi let him come, and let him talk, and let him lean. And the ice went on remembering. It changed him slowly, in ways the household began to notice before he did. The man who had ruled by fear found that fear had begun to feel like a poorer tool than it had before. He was gentler in small ways he could not have named, and the gentleness confused everyone and unsettled some, and was received by others, the ones who had served him longest and most warily, with a cautious, disbelieving relief. His men noticed that the cold had cracks in it now, small warm fissures, and they did not understand where they had come from, because they did not know about the tree and about the boy who leaned on his arm and told him about bugs. Amara understood, because Amara saw all of it. She watched, with a wariness that took a long time to fade, as the man she had been terrified of allowed her son to change him. She kept expecting the trap to spring, kept waiting for the warmth to reveal itself as a manipulation, for the interest in Obi to curdle into something she'd have to protect the boy from. It never did. What she saw instead, over weeks and then months, was a man rediscovering a capacity he had buried so long ago he'd forgotten he'd buried it, and using her son, gently and gratefully, as the road back to it. "Why did you let him, that first day?" she asked Takeshi once, when enough time had passed that she could ask him things. "You could have ended it. You're not a man who lets things happen to him. Why did you let a stranger's child sit down and talk to you?" Takeshi considered the question with the seriousness he had begun, lately, to give to questions. "Because I was tired," he said finally. "Not that day especially. In general. I've been tired for a very long time, in a way that sleep doesn't fix, and I never let myself notice it, because noticing it would have been a crack in the thing that keeps me alive. And your son sat down beside me, and leaned on my arm, and expected nothing from me, and for the length of time he leaned there, I wasn't tired. I didn't understand it. I still don't entirely. But I knew, that first afternoon, that it was the only rest I'd had in years, and I was not willing to give it up as quickly as I should have." He looked at her. "That's the honest answer. I've started giving honest answers lately. It's another thing your son did to me. It's harder than it looks, after a lifetime of the other kind." Amara did not know what to say to that. "I want you to know," Takeshi went on, "that nothing about this puts you or him in any danger, and nothing about it obligates you to anything. I'm aware of the shape of it, a powerful man taking an interest in a servant's child, all the ugly things that shape usually means. I want to be certain you know that's not what this is. If you wanted to take him and leave this house tomorrow, I would help you go, and I would make sure you were provided for, and I would grieve the loss of the only rest I've found in years, and I would not for 1 second stand in your way. He's yours. Nothing changes that. I'm only asking to be allowed near the warmth, not to own it. There's a difference, and I need you to trust that I understand it." And she found, slowly, over a long time, that she did trust it, because he proved it, consistently, in 100 small ways. He never crossed a line she had not opened. He never used his power over her to secure his access to her son. He gave her, quietly, more standing in the house, more security, more freedom, including, pointedly, the freedom to leave, and he made the freedom real, so that her staying was a choice and not a captivity, and it was that above all else that let her begin to lower her guard. The boy, of course, understood none of it. Obi simply had a friend now, a large, quiet friend under a tree, and he grew, and he talked in fuller sentences as the months passed. And the fuller sentences let Takeshi understand more of what the child was telling him, and understanding more only deepened the thing that had started. Takeshi learned the boy's fears and delights. He learned that Obi was frightened of the dark and fascinated by anything with wheels and fierce in his small loyalties. He learned, in short, a child. The first child he had ever let himself know, and in learning the child he learned, backward and late, the person he might have been if the world had not frozen him so young. The household transformed around this quiet miracle. A house ruled by a cold man is a cold house, and a house whose cold man is thawing becomes cautiously a warmer place. The staff relaxed. The fear that had been the house's atmosphere for years thinned into something more like ordinary respect, and then into something that occasionally resembled loyalty of the real kind, the kind that is given rather than extracted. And at the center of it, improbably, was a 2-year-old who had wandered up to a man pretending to sleep and decided, on no evidence, that he was safe to lean on. What grew between Takeshi and Amara grew last and slowest and most carefully, because both of them had the most reason for caution. He was who he was, and she was who she was. And the distance in power between them was a real thing that neither of them pretended away. He did not court her while he held that power over her, he understood, with the clarity of a man who had spent his life around the ugly uses of power, that a wealthy master pursuing a maid in his employ was a thing that could go very wrong no matter how gentle his intentions. So he changed the arrangement first. He made her a person who could leave, truly leave, with security and dignity intact, and only once she could genuinely refuse him did he let her see, carefully, that he hoped she would not. She took a long time to decide. He let her take it. And what she eventually chose, she chose freely, from safety, on her own terms, which was the only way a woman like Amara could have chosen it, and the only way a changed man like Takeshi would have wanted her to. Here is the thing about the coldness that hard men wear like armor. They believe it is who they are. They have worn it so long, and it has kept them alive through so much, that they can no longer tell the difference between the armor and the body beneath it, and they will tell you, with total sincerity, that there is nothing underneath, that the warmth was burned out of them long ago, that they are simply cold all the way through. And they are almost always wrong. The warmth is not gone. It is only frozen, buried under years of necessary ice, waiting for the one thing cold enough armor cannot defend against, which is not another blow, because they have armored themselves against blows, but a small trusting weight leaning against their arm, expecting nothing, afraid of nothing, offering the one thing they have gone their whole lives without. A cold-hearted man pretended to sleep beneath a tree so he could keep watch on a world he trusted no one in. And a 2-year-old who did not know enough to be afraid sat down beside him and reminded him, without meaning to, without knowing he was doing it, that ice remembers what it was, and that it is never too late and never too cold to begin to thaw.